What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome on back to the Between the Boards podcast with your boy Halsey. And happy Tuesday, everybody. Thanks for tuning on in. And look at me. Back to back. We go back to back. Didn't even take a day break just because there's so much to talk about. And I feel like I missed a lot of stuff yesterday because I took a bit of a week break, and I feel like I missed a lot of stuff. So yesterday we did have our first time doing a Q&A on the Between the Boards podcast, and let's just say it went really well. I think a lot of people reached out to me after saying that they kind of like this new kind of segment that I've been doing. So I think I came to the conclusion that in each podcast I'm going to do one. I'm not going to do like 8 questions like I did last time. I think we're going to cut it in half, and I think we have a lot of people reached out to me, and we're going to get to a couple of those today towards the end of today's podcast. But I was very happy with how yesterday's podcast turned out. A lot of people reached out to me after to talk about some things, so I really appreciate that. And I love when people reach out to me after watching each and every episode. So shout out to everyone who reaches out. But yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Right now is a prime time in the NHL. All the trades are going down. People are getting re-signed. The standings in the wildcard are getting close. Teams are making a bit of comebacks, like the Montreal Canadiens. So yeah, we have a lot of decent stuff to talk about. I got some questions that people reached out to me and wanted me to talk about on today's episode. So yeah, why don't we just go over the agenda? Because like we always do, so people know what we're going to get into today. Starting off, we'll talk about the Leafs. We always do. It's usually what I like to start off each and every episode with. But not going to talk about too much. There's just some little things that I want to talk about, especially with the coaching and the goaltending and players who are returning back. I do want to talk a little bit on the Bruins and how, I don't know, I do kind of believe that the Bruins might be throwing in the towel. We'll touch a little bit on that. Next, we're going to talk about the trades that have been going on around the league and players who have been getting re-signed and maybe what we could see in the next couple days. We're going to take a look at the wild card and what teams are looking at, what kind of points they're at, and what are the 2 top teams that are sitting in a wild card spot, and what teams we could possibly see make their way up and get into that playoff spot. And then we're going to end off today's podcast with these lovely questions that people were able to send to me that they wanted me to answer on today's podcast. So I'm looking forward to covering all this. Should be a great episode. So let's get into it and let's drop the puck. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start off with the Leafs. So going into yesterday's game, Leafs taking on the San Jose Sharks Monday night. Game's on Prime, so it sucks. You can't watch it on whatever you usually watch it on. Leafs fall to the Sharks in a shootout, which a lot of us going into this game and watching this game kind of had a feeling that, why do I feel like we're going to lose this game against the Sharks? Literally the last place team in all of the NHL. I believe that was their 16th win last night, and going into this game, they were on an 8-game losing streak. So obviously the Sharks are going through their rebuild right now. But I was impressed by a lot of the Sharks players. I did say to you guys in yesterday's podcast, watch the Leaf game tonight and look out for Macklin Celabrini. And I believe he was a game-time decision. I think he was dealing with some type of injury. But, man, it did not seem like it. The kid was flying out there, creating so many chances. I believe he's on that line with Will Smith. And those two together, I know they're best buddies on and off the ice. So putting those two together, I really liked the way they had it there. Their power play, both Smith and Celabrini are on the power play. And I thought Celabrini and Smith both look really good. Both played in NCAA last year. Celabrini with Boston University and Will Smith with Boston College. So both those players having their fair share of time in NCAA, and they're both going to be excellent players as they get older. But they got a long road ahead of them. They're going to be excellent players, and was very impressed by both of their games last night. They both moved the puck very well. Calle Jarnkrok for the Toronto Maple Leafs made his season debut yesterday after being injured. He got hurt in Game 7 of last year against the Bruins in the playoffs and made his season debut yesterday, and didn't really stand out. He was playing on the fourth line with Connor Dewar and David Kampf. So not a lot of ice time, I believe, after the first period. Only had 3 minutes of play. But it's really tricky because I guess you kind of have to start him on the fourth line, but like I don't really know. Like you have that third line with Domi, Robertson, and McMahon, right? So that line's rolling. You're not going to put unless you maybe switch Holmberg and Yarncrow. Put Yarncrow with Nylander and Tavares after time, but it could get to that. But I think Holmberg's been playing good lately, so I don't think they're going to switch two things up. I was kind of hoping Yarncrow's an expensive player, so it's going to be hard to trade a guy like him. But we'll see what happens with him. I don't know if he'll be a Leaf for too much longer. But yeah, nothing too crazy with Yarncrow. I do want to talk a little bit about Wall and Stolar. So Stolar's in net last night, which I kind of thought they were going to go with Wall for the second straight game, just as we're going back on the road. I believe we take on Vegas tomorrow night in Vegas. So we go on the road, and then I believe that we go to Colorado and then Utah after that. So I was kind of thinking that maybe we go Wall against San Jose, so we can have Stolars in there against Vegas and Colorado, which they may do. But I don't think Stolar's played bad last night. A couple times he didn't know where the puck was, which caused the first goal for the Sharks. And what I really want to talk about here is I've talked about this before. Is like if the playoffs started today, do we go Stolar's or Wall in Game 1? And I think what it's really going to come down to is I think as of right now, Stolar's is your Game 1 starter. But let's just say Stolar's has one bad game, then I think they go Wall, like the next game. And if Wall, whoever just rolling in the playoffs is who they're going to roll. If I don't think there's going to be like that number one goaltender. I think it's just really whoever is rolling at that time is going to be their guy throughout the playoffs. I think that's kind of how it went in last year's playoffs. We started with Samsonov, but really like Wall was the one who took over because he was hot at the time. So I think that's how it's going to be in the playoffs. And I think that's really how majority of teams will go. Unless you got a guy like Hellebuck or Bobrovsky or Vasilevsky. Those guys are all just dominant, right? So lastly, with the Leafs, I do want to talk about Craig Berube versus Sheldon Keefe. Not necessarily versus, but I just want to basically compare the two for a second. So I think Craig Berube has done an excellent job with the Leafs this year. I know that he's enjoyed his time with the Leafs organization this year. He loves the group of guys that he's with. I think he has a really good connection with a lot of those guys. He was a former Maple Leaf himself. And the thing is, like, Sheldon Keefe was a good coach. And I think a lot of us, I was a fan of Sheldon Keefe. He had an excellent regular season record with the Leafs, but when the playoffs came by, it was just a complete disaster. So I think what it is this year, Craig Berube and his regular season record with the Leafs this year is great. But if we could see Berube do good things in the playoffs this year, I think he's our guy. I already think he's our guy. I have a good feeling about the Leafs going to the playoffs right now. Going into the playoffs, but I do like Berube. I also do like Brad Shevling way better than Kyle Dubas. Unfortunately, Dubas seems to be flip-flopping things left and right over there in Pittsburgh, making so many unnecessary trades. So I'm glad we have Shevling as a GM. I think he's an excellent GM. He came from Calgary, where he did some pretty good things over there too as well. So that's all we got with the Leafs, but I do want to touch up on the Bruins, as around 2 hours ago, the Bruins traded one of their second line or third line centers, Trent Frederick, to the Edmonton Oilers for a first round pick, or I know a second round pick, might have been a first round pick as well, and a defenseman, which I don't know, haven't heard too much. I think it was a defenseman who I don't really know too much on. So this was a big trade. Trent Frederick was on the horizon for getting traded, but this is my thing, right? Is this Boston throwing in the towel, saying we're done? Because looking at the standings right now, they're 1 point out of a wild card spot, and they're already like getting away one of your top centers. Are they not trying to make that playoff push? Because I really thought Boston would be that team that is, even if they were 5 points out of a wild card spot, even 6 or 7 or 8, they'd still be that team that would be like, you know what? Let's beat Buyers. Let's get into the playoffs. That's the way I see kind of Boston's mentality. I didn't know that. Like, I know there was so much talk about getting rid of Trent Frederick, and he was on the trading block, but is this them throwing in the towel? And they're going through a really rough time right now. Lindholm's out for the rest of the season. McAvoy's going to miss a lot of time, and Marchand's now week to week, so it's not looking good for the Bruins. I know Pasternak's been carrying that whole team on his back throughout the last couple weeks. So, but is this the Bruins throwing in the towel? Trent Frederic is also having an excellent season. I really think this was a really good trade for Edmonton. And I think if there's any team that needed Trent Frederic, it was Edmonton, because you got guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, so many skilled players, but I really wanted to add a little bit more physicality, and Trent Frederic's going to bring that to the Oilers, so I think that's a really good move for the Oilers, and I think that's someone who they've been eyeing, especially going into this deadline, and I think they got their guy, and I do see the Oilers making a couple more moves before the deadline, maybe even offensively too, more. I know Frederic is a center, but I think that's a really good start for them, a really good start. That's all I got for teams. Let's talk about the trades. So we just talked about that trade, but another trade that happened the other day was the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Blackhawks made a trade. Chicago sending over Seth Jones, defenseman, to the Florida Panthers for a 2026 first-round pick and goaltender Spencer Knight. Chicago won this trade by a mile. Seth Jones hasn't been doing much for Chicago. We knew he was going to get traded, and they won this trade. Spencer Knight, they need goaltending, Chicago. Peter Mrazek is their main guy there, so now they got Spencer Knight. Started in net last night, won. He got his first win as a Blackhawk. Blackhawks beat the Kings 5-1, saved 41 of the 42 shots that he faced, got the W, and this is an excellent trade for Chicago, and I did feel bad for Spencer, because I know he's filled with talent. Kind of reminds me of a goaltender like Trey Augustine, who's going to be coming up. Also spent his time with USA. I know he played a couple World Juniors there, and it was just so much talent sitting on the bench because they have Sergei Bobrovsky, who's their number one goaltender over there in Florida. So I'm glad that he's going to play for a team where he's going to get more recognized, and he already has, coming with a huge win last night. And I think he's going to be in Chicago for a while, and I do like where he's at right now. And excellent trade for Chicago. Also getting a first round pick in there, getting rid of Seth Jones. You guys are already done for the season, so excellent trade. And to stay with Florida, they announced yesterday that Matthew Tkachuk is most likely out until the playoffs. So that creates like $8 million in cap space. So it's kind of like what the Lightning did a couple of years ago when they had, I don't know who it was that was out. It might have been Kucherov. But a lot of cap space opens up there. So I do expect the Florida Panthers to make a couple more moves before the deadline. Talking about re-signings, a player who we talked a lot about, the Montreal Canadiens re-signed Jake Evans to a 4-year contract, $2.85 million average. So this is really good for Montreal. And one of the questions I answered in yesterday's podcast was, what do I think Montreal is going to be doing at the deadline? And I basically said, I don't think they're going to do anything, but I don't think that no one's going to leave. So re-signing Jake Evans is great. And Montreal's in a good spot right now. They're 1 point out of a wild card spot. So I know they're on a bit of a heater right now. They beat the Sabres in overtime last night. Jake Matheson, is it Mike Matheson or Jake Matheson? Ended it last night for them in overtime. So Habs are on a heater. I do want to see them make the playoffs, even coming from a Leafs fan. And they really got something going there. But maybe if they maybe I don't know if they're going to add anybody, but I definitely Really what I'd say, I think that if they were to make a move, they're definitely not giving up anybody. They would be adding somebody where the Habs are right now, which was kind of surprising to me when Boston made that move yesterday. So Habs are in a good spot. Habs are in a really, really good spot. So before we go any further, make sure you guys subscribe to the Between the Boards podcast. We're at around 115 subscribers right now. Let's get it to 125. Let's get it to 150. And I do appreciate all the support as of lately. Always much appreciated. Let's go to the wild card. Let's look at the wild card spots right now because everything's all over the place. Teams are flip-flopping. And I've mentioned this a lot, especially in the Atlantic division with Montreal, Ottawa, and Boston. I know it's flip-flopped a lot. So let's just take a look. We'll take a look at the East and we'll take a look at the West. So in the East, we have already in not in wild card spots like in the division. We have the Leafs, Tampa, and Florida, who are in that top 3 spot. And then you have Carolina. Who are the other 2 teams that were in there? Anyway, but let's just look at the wild card really quickly. So in the first wild card spot, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have been a surprising factor this year. I do expect them to make a trade at the deadline. To get another player, because I do think they're going to be a playoff team this year. They're in the first wild card spot, 68 points. They got guys like Marchenko and Fantilli who are having bounce back seasons, and obviously Zach Werenski, who's having his best NHL season and is possibly going to be a Norris Trophy winner. In the second wild card spot with 66 points, and third spot tied with 66 points, we have the Detroit Red Wings and the New York Rangers. So I think the Rangers are making their push right now. Got JT Miller a couple weeks ago. He's made a big impact to that Rangers roster, and I think it's going to be one of those 2 teams that sneaks in that second spot. I would love to see teams like Ottawa or Montreal, but I do think it's going to be one of those 2 teams. So for those 2, maybe possibly some other possible picks. I know the Rangers did trade one of their top defensemen the other day to Lindgren to the Avalanche. So that was a little surprising for me. So we have Detroit in second, Rangers third spot. They're tied with Detroit. And in the fourth spot, we got the Ottawa Senators, and fifth spot, Montreal Canadiens, both tied at 65 points. So again, it's 1 win, and they're in that wild card spot. They'll get 2 points for a win, 1 point for going into overtime, and you lose. So I do want to see as many Canadian teams in the playoffs as possible, man. It's been such a long time since the Canadian teams won it. I do want to see Ottawa in the playoffs. I think they do really good things. I think when you have a guy like Brady Tkachuk in the playoffs, and a guy who hasn't really played I don't know if he's ever played in a playoff game before. I don't think so. But you got a guy like Claude Giroux who's been there who's been in a playoff game before. I mean, they got a lot of young talent over there. Allmark's having a pretty solid season, so I'd love to see Ottawa or Montreal in the playoffs. And then in that last spot there, I didn't add in all the other teams below just because they're not really in the spot right now. But the Boston Bruins, 64 points. I hope to see them maybe possibly make a move, but I think the Bruins threw in the towel, man. I think they did. Let's go over to the West. So right now, Colorado dropped down to the first wild card spot. Minnesota took them over in the standings. So Colorado's at 72 points. They're 7 points ahead of the second place team, Calgary. And I do think before the end of the season, Colorado's going to make a bit of a push, and I do think that they're going to overcome Minnesota again because Nathan McKinnon, Carr, basically the second and third best player in the NHL, in my opinion. I think they're going to make their way back up there. Sitting at 72 points. The second spot and third spot both tied at 65 points. We have the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks. So the Canucks have been really a lot better ever since trading JT Miller. And I think it kind of just got all that negativity out of the air. But I do think that that the Canucks should trade Elias Pettersson, maybe get a good package for that. I would love to see that. And a team who I honestly didn't know were too far behind both of these teams is in fourth spot with 64 points, the St. Louis Blues, and there's been talk about them trading their captain, Braden Chen. I know that apparently he's been linked to the Leafs, but only 64. They're only one win out of a playoff spot. So we'll see what happens there. And then the fifth spot is at 63 points, also not too far out, is the Utah Hockey Club at 63 points, right? So they've been a really surprising team this year. I know Dylan Gunther's really stepped up his game, same as Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller, all having excellent seasons. So hopefully, I would love to see Utah make the playoffs. I don't think it will happen. I think it's give it maybe next year or 2 more years, and I think we'll finally see them in that playoff spot. But we'll see what happens. Everything's so close right now. Let's go to my favorite segment of today's episode, where we're going to start doing this each and every single episode, where we talk about basically we do a Q&A. So I'm going to probably answer. I got 4 questions here that I'm going to answer. All excellent questions, and obviously I can't get all of them, but I kind of just took the ones that are most interesting. So the first one I have was I'm not going to say any names, but the question was, Nolan, who chooses the players for the Olympics, and is the NHL shut down while the Olympics is on? So to answer this, John Cooper is the coach of was the coach for Canada for the Four Nations, and he's also going to be the coach for Canada for the Olympics. So him, as long as the whole Canadian board and all the other the coaching staff, really. So John Cooper and his coaching staff are the really the ones who are the final decisions on making this team. Obviously, the whole Canadian directing board, they all kind of have the talks about what players could fit best, and but I know John Cooper, the Tampa Bay Lightning coach, makes a big has a lot to say for that team. And is the NHL shut down? Yes. For the 2 weeks that the Olympics is going on, there's no NHL games going on. So I know the last Olympics, the NHL, I believe, kept on going because the NHL guys didn't get to play in it, and this year they do. So it's gonna be sick to see this, because obviously, like I've said before, best on best hockey, seeing teams represent their country is one of my favorite things. So there's there's your answer. Next question was, with so few players who actually ever reach the NHL level, what makes the difference? Is it just skill or skill as well as the dedication on and off the ice talent? So another excellent question. This is a really good question. It's kind of tough to answer. So I think that obviously you need to be a skilled player to play in the NHL, but what really matters to a lot of teams, like you can look at a guy, like I was saying this to my brother the other day, because I was kind of comparing two players. You got to know what your role is, right? So for me, you're looking at a team like let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs for a second. And you have a guy like Ryan Reeves, who's a fighter and more of an aggressive player, and basically is just in the lineup to lay the hits and lay the tone if he needs to get his team going by fighting every so often. That's what he's there for. When you take a guy like Fraser Minton, who's in the minors, who is more skilled than Ryan Reeves, like he's going to score more goals, he's going to get more assists. But so then if I were to say to you, who's a more skilled hockey player, Fraser Minton or Ryan Reeves, what would you say? Probably Fraser Minton, just looking at points wise. But then you look at it and it's like, yeah, Minton's young, but who plays the more NHL games right now? Ryan Reeves, because players have different roles. So I think it just matters is what your kind of role is, right? Like obviously, if you're a super skilled player and you're always scoring goals, then yeah, you're going to be in the NHL. But what it really matters to is knowing what your role is, and if you're going to be that more aggressive kind of player that you have in the lineup, or maybe you're that fourth liner who wins all the draws and stuff. It really just matters to what your role is. But really, it comes down. Really, it's like your skills, but know what your role is in the NHL, and on a team, know what your role is. That's one of the biggest factors, in my opinion. Excellent question. Next question was, who would you say today, day in and day out, is the best player and why? So reading this question, I think it was kind of obvious. And I think it'd be, for me, well, the best player day in and day out in each and every game for me is Connor McDavid. He's the best player in the world, hands down. There's no way to argue that. But I think a player who is really on and off the ice, a great player and leader and just a great person in general, would have to be Sidney Crosby, because just of the way how skilled he is at such getting up there in his career, and he's also just a great leader, and he'll do anything for his team. And I've seen so many clips of him like basically on the bench saying, like, there was a guy who missed like a wide open net and he's like, guys, we'll get it back, we're good. Such a great leader. He's been the captain for Canada many times, and I think when it comes to on and off the ice, he's usually the first guy on the ice, the last one off. So I would go Crosby for this one, but the most skilled player in the NHL would definitely hands down have to be Connor McDavid. So that's what I have for that. And last question, also another good one, was what are my thoughts on the Winter Classic being in Florida next year? So this is a tricky one. I don't know if I'm towards it or if I'm against it. Really, it's different. I do not think that it's called the Winter Classic, but it's not really too much winter in Florida. So I think it's different. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I you know what? I don't think I really like it. I think the Winter Classic is meant to be played outside in the cold with the snow and not in like is it I don't know how hot it is in Florida during their winter time. Like how would the my ice melt? Like how would I don't know how it would work really, but I believe it's Florida and Tampa playing in that game. I'm not a fan of it. I think I'd rather it just be the Winter Classic somewhere cold. Put it in like Toronto or put it in somewhere like cold, like Michigan or something, or Colorado in the mountains. Somewhere in the mountains, I think would be cool, and I think a lot of people were hoping to see that sometime soon. So that's what I got for that, and yeah, I think it's kind of silly, but that's all I got for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all enjoyed it. It was a lot of stuff to talk about on this episode. So hopefully we'll be back in the next couple days. Hopefully there's more trades we can hopefully discuss on. And yeah, so thanks for tuning on in to the Between the Boards podcast. I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful night, and we'll see you in a couple days. Later.